to Live with Lisa Michaels, the only conservative talk show on television in the Portland metropolitan area that I know of. Lots of conservative radio shows, but there's no conservative television shows. You can listen to conservative radio, Lars Larson, Victoria Taft. So you are in for a big treat. We have a wonderful candidate, most brilliant guy I've ever met, James Buchal, our Attorney General candidate. He won the write-in campaign as a Republican. He is the Republican nominee for Attorney General to try to help get this state back on track. Oregon. So let's meet the man himself. Here it is, James. Welcome again to the show. We're going to have you on a lot during the campaign season. I want you to call in and ask the brilliant James Buchal a question, okay? This guy's got a better, in my opinion, he's got a better resume than even Mitt Romney. He has an undergrad in physics from Harvard. He has a law degree and an MBA from Yale. Now, Romney has a law degree and an MBA from Harvard. The seminal issue that is facing the country right now, which is the nightmare decision by the Supreme Court on Obamacare.
Well, it's a depressing and dark day for those of us who are conservatives because this is a real nail in the coffin of limited federal government. Under the reasoning of Justice Roberts, Congress can essentially do anything it wants because it can just say, do what we tell you or we'll tax you. And we'll tax you hundreds of dollars or maybe thousands of dollars. Do what you want or we'll tax you. And that's contrary to the whole idea of limited government. And it's just makes a mess out of everything. I don't know how to describe it. It's just mind-bogglingly poor constitutional interpretation, mind-bogglingly poor government. It's a real setback to freedom and prosperity.
Let's talk a little bit about how bad Obamacare will be for our country if it stays in place. What do you think is going to be the result of it?
Well, the result of it is that essentially we are going to drive private insurance out of business and bankrupt it as part of sort of their long-term scheme to get what they call a single payer system, which is there's essentially, you have a problem with your health, you go to the government. And the end result is essentially you're a cow and the government is the farmer, and the farmer will decide what drugs you need or what treatments you're allowed. And it's a horrible thing. You can see it operating in some of these other countries now. In England, the elderly people are dying like flies in the hospital because the hospitals are now run by the DMV, and you know, while you're choking to death or whatever it is, you know, you take a number, you know, the nurse will be to see you in 2 hours. Obamacare is essentially like some, you know, a bastard love child of the pharmaceutical industry and the insurance industry and all these things. So it's crafted to protect a lot of corporate interests at the expense of turning individuals into, as I said, farm animals.
If you were in charge, and as a candidate for Attorney General of Oregon, what would you like to have done? What do you think should be done?
The answer is obvious. Health care is a complicated issue, and it's obvious that just as with everything else the federal government does, that the one-size-fits-all solution for everybody, a uniform national this or that, it's none of the federal government's business. The right answer is the federal government should have nothing at all to do with health care, because virtually everything time the federal government gets involved with health care, it gets worse. Everything that they do makes things worse. I mean, there was a time when the federal government made things. You know, they go out and they build the Bonneville Dam, or they actually contributed something. They build the interstate highway system. And now that's all gone. We don't get anything more now. If they work on the highway system, they take the lane and they move it 100 feet to the left and 100 feet to the right and clean up this thing on the, well, we never get any more lanes, you know what I mean? Everybody knows that who's been driving. And so what we need is to get the federal government out of the healthcare business. And then it's up to each state to figure out what they want to do. You know, Dr. Kitzhaber can experiment in Oregon, and Mitt Romney can experiment in Massachusetts, and Idaho can experiment, and maybe we'll find something that works better than the government leaving its hands off it, but I doubt it. Yeah, we take the worst systems, the worst, like California, and we say, We take all of the ideas that don't work and we say now everyone's got to do them because, gosh, it's the classic communist answer. Well, we didn't try hard enough. We didn't do enough of it. It's like Keynesian economics.
Oh, and we had the right feeling. Our intentions were good.
Right. You know what where the road to hell is paved with good intentions. But it's the answer. It's the answer they always have. Whatever the dumb policy is, whether it's borrowing great gobs of money to stimulate the economy, we borrow $1 trillion, $2 trillion, $3 trillion. Oh well, we just haven't tried enough. How about $5 trillion? You know, and anybody who actually can count or has any understanding of economics whatsoever recognizes that this is nuts and we're drowning in debt. And it's the same thing with health care. There are states that work, there are states that don't work, and ultimately, if you leave the states free to do what they do, it'll become obvious who the failures are and we can copy the successes instead of the failures. But if we take the people from the California and the big failure states and we put them in charge of everything, we know what we're going to get: failure.
So that no president in the future could ever do something like this again. What would be your legal remedy if you were going to suggest something?
My idea is that you just have to take the power away from the federal government unequivocally. And to take the power away from the federal government unequivocally, there's really only one way to do that, which is to amend the Constitution. I've thought of two reasons that the government's in charge of health care. One is that the government has the power to tax. And indeed, if you begin to read the Constitution, you'll see it has the power to raise taxes and duties and so forth and so on. And then it says to provide for the defense and the common welfare. And then it says semicolon, and then it has all these powers: the power to raise armies, the power to raise a navy, the power to build post roads, the power to regulate interstate commerce among the several states, and all this kind of stuff. This is a historical fight that goes way back, because back when the Constitution was passed, people looked at that language that said the power to raise taxes to promote the general welfare, and they said, you guys are making a mistake. If they have the power to raise taxes to promote the general welfare, doesn't that mean they can do anything? And James Madison, who was writing under the pseudonym Publius, if I remember correctly, in the Federalist, said, this is stupid. This is just dumb. We had the same thing in the Articles of Confederation. It didn't mean that. It's the beginning of this long string of a single sentence, and the rest of the sentence obviously limits the meaning of promote the general welfare. So it doesn't mean that. You have the power to raise the taxes to do the enumerated powers that Congress is supposed to have, not the power to raise taxes for anything. So but I guess, even though it was clear to James Madison and the other founders, I guess we have to make it a little clearer. One way they said they could do it was taxing. But the way that four of the liberals think that you can do it is by the power to regulate commerce among the several states. And again, the founders knew what commerce among the several states is. It's among the states because you're shipping goods from one state to another. And so it's called the Interstate Commerce Clause, and it's got nothing to do with doctors and patients in the middle of some town in the middle of nowhere that's nowhere near a state border. And it's about goods. It's about the movement of goods across borders. It's not about services. But again, people can't seem to read this fairly simple idea, even though they put in the 10th Amendment that said if we haven't given Congress the power, it doesn't have it. So we have to fix that one too.
So do we have to fix the 10th Amendment?
No, the 10th Amendment is the one that works. The 10th Amendment is the one that says, look, you dummies, just in case there's no doubt, if we didn't specifically give Congress the power, it doesn't have it. Those powers are reserved to the states and the people. And now you see law review articles like the forgotten 10th Amendment, because what happens is nobody wants to pay attention to that because it limits the power of government. And so if you have a bunch of government people who are out deciding how much power government has, the answer is always more.
Well, now, why are you in such a minority in Oregon and probably across the country in your profession that seems to understand these simple truths and is more conservative?
I don't know. I mean, it's like the boy who says the emperor has no clothes. I mean, you read the English language, you see what it means, and it's like, this is obvious. Upton Sinclair once said that it's very hard to get a person to understand something if his salary depends on not understanding it. And we now have large armies of people whose salary depends on lies about the Constitution. So the lies are going to be real strong.
Do you know if Codex is in the Obamacare?
Yeah, that's quite a scandal. I know that the big pharmaceutical companies are somehow involved in pressuring FDA to really crack down on the nutritional supplement industry.
Right, and they want to put everything under prescription.
Yeah, it's remarkable, and this of course is what makes medical care so expensive. You know, but it all comes from the same view that the people are sort of the government's cows, and they're only allowed to eat or take what the government puts in front of them, doesn't it?
Because if you don't eat organic foods, you don't get your minerals. You don't get a whole lot of anything.
No, it's true, and so it's very important, you know, in this twilight of our freedoms, it's very important for people like you to recognize that, you know, there are two paths we can go down here, and one is the cow path, and the other is the free people allowed to make their own choices path. Because there's some ugly, ugly things going on. There was a case I read about in the D.C. Court of Appeals. Some cancer patient is dying, and the cancer patient wants to take a drug that's available experimental in Europe, is working like gangbusters, and they won't give it to her. You know, they'll go to jail if they give it to her because it's not approved. And so she goes to court and she says, wait a minute, I'm not a cow. I'm an American. I have certain inalienable rights. One of those inalienable rights is the right to life. And she says, I want to save my life by taking this drug. And the court's answer was, we don't care. You know, the interest of the regulatory bureaucracy is far more important than your life, so die. And this is the type of decision that we are getting out of the courts now as we elect more and more people who see the people as cows.
The only thing we can do is we the people is elect people that we trust, like James, to go in there and stand up for our rights.
Well, I am against the health bill, first of all, because of the Codex, C-O-D-E-X, for anybody that wants to look it up. I'm totally against that because it takes away my right. I'm a constitutionalist. I do believe in the Constitution, and we're losing it bit by bit.
Boy, you're sure right about that.
And they're doing it so subversively that people don't even know it's happening.
Yep.
They start giving the states all this money in exchange for, you know, okay, you got to give up this right, you got to give up this, you got to do that. When the federal government gives money.
Are there circumstances where, when you have these values that are important to you, that you would vote for the Democrats? Are there any of the Democrats you perceive as actually interested in restoring the Constitution or cutting the size of government?
You know, I don't like either party. I am so fed up with.
But have you ever voted for, I mean, because the Democrats are completely hostile to everything you just mentioned.
Well,
you
no,
do know that, right?
No, yeah.
Your values are conservative. Everything that you've just espoused are conservative.
I've been impressed with James.
Well, I was very impressed with him. That's why I begged him to run when I saw we had no candidate.
I certainly enjoyed talking with both of you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. You've been watching the Live with Lisa Michaels show, the only conservative talk show. It's live the second Wednesday of every month. Thank you so much to James Buchal, Attorney General candidate here in Oregon. And I'm Lisa Michaels.
Thanks for having me on, Lisa.
Sure.